All right. Welcome back to the Picking Your Brain podcast, where we interview people doing ministry at a high level. And on today's episode, we are so lucky to have Ryan McDermott joining us. What's up, Ryan?
Hey man, how's it going? Super excited about the conversation.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on. As I was just telling you before we push record, you were one of the top 10 that I was like, man, I have to have Ryan on here. And I'm just humbled that you agreed to be a part of
Oh,
this. So thank you so much. And I'm
yeah,
looking forward to helping pick your brain a little bit.
let's do it, man. I'm excited.
All right. So if you would, for anybody that may not know you, will you just let everybody know where you're serving and all those good things?
Yeah. So my name is Ryan McDermott. I serve at Christ Fellowship Church in the West Palm Beach area of South Florida. It's a multi-site church with 12 locations around our region. I look after kids, students, young adults ministry here. So just the vision, philosophy, direction, caring for those teams who are executing ministry at the campuses. And then I also do a lot with Student Leadership University and just two incredible organizations I really believe in. So been doing student ministry stuff for like 18 years now. So just getting
Wow.
started.
Just getting the ball rolling. Yeah.
Figuring
Well,
some things out.
well, Ryan, the format of the podcast is super simple. I'm just going to ask you a few questions about you as a minister and how you think through things, and then how we can maybe possibly learn from you today. And so, the first question I want to ask you is, what resources do you typically use when writing a sermon, and then what does that process look like for you? As somebody who's been doing it for 18 years, I'm sure that process has developed and grown. But if you would just share with us what that looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And everybody's process is a little bit different. I mean, for me, I like to be as far ahead as I possibly can be. So typically looking at when it's in my control, having at least 12 months on rotation where we kind of know where we're going and what we're going to be tackling and all of that, because I'm a processor. So I do my best thinking
Mhm.
over time. And so ideally, I love to know with about as much lead time as I can, what the subject's going to be, what the scriptures are, or whatever kind of the guardrails are for the message. And then for me, I like to just consume as much material as I possibly can on any given,
Yeah.
text or subject, kind of all sides of the aisle. Just like I'm reading books, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm reading commentaries, all the things that we normally do. But what I find is if I do that over time, through like prayer and discernment, it really helps me to kind of distill what the Lord is speaking to me about the passage and how
Yeah.
I would understand it theologically. And so I feel like when we're rushed, we really don't have the time to do that. So I use a lot of the same tools that everybody else probably uses, like Logos, and I have a handful of
Mhm.
go-to commentaries, that I use and all of that. But really, my favorite part of the process is just time. That's the biggest resource. The more time, the
Yeah.
better. And then, one of my kind of core commitments, if you will, is like I don't believe that, um, at least by process or by definition, that messages should be prepared in isolation. I really
Okay.
value collaboration. And so, obviously the Lord can give you a word and download that word, give you
Yeah.
revelation, all that. I'm not negating any of that. I know God works in that way. But I just find for me, a lot of revelation typically comes in the form of conversation. I find like as I
Mhm.
talk about scriptures with people, it sharpens my understanding and it helps me think about what other people are thinking about, not just through my lens or my focus. So I really value collaboration, and we've really built that into our process as it relates to student ministry. Is we do have a team here and of student pastors, and we write
Yeah.
our messages collaboratively. So we send out all the stuff to prepare ahead of time. We sit around the table, we discuss the scriptures, and we really stack hands on, the what the points are going to be, some illustrations or rationale, different things we can add to our presentation of the text. But really we just try to make each other better, because I feel like by
Yeah.
default you kind of slide into the same examples, the same stories. You everybody's kind of got to like their life message, just like the big
Yeah.
things that they constantly come back to and hit on. And so by making that process collaborative, I've just found it's made me such a better communicator of the gospel. And so really value collaboration.
I got you. Well, whenever you're talking, I remember back to me 10 years ago hearing a guy say that he prepared his sermons 12 months out. And like that blew my mind. I'm like, how in the world? I don't know what I'm talking about in 2 hours. How in the world
Yes.
do you know? And so, like, and so over the summer, I've gotten, I think it's a Lifeway resource, but it's the Ages and Stages. I don't know if it's a
Yes.
little bitty thin. And it kind of
Yep.
breaks down at this age. You know, I'm a middle school pastor for anybody who's listening that doesn't know. And so
Yep.
I tried to look at their middle school stage, and it says this is what they should know about God. This is what they should know about the Holy Spirit. And so this last
Sure.
year at summer camp, I spent a lot of time at camp trying to prepare the next year. I want them to learn about God, about the world, about salvation, about evangelism. And so I laid out the next 12 months of sermons based on
Let's
those
go.
topics so that I could sit in front of my parents and say, hey, over the next 12 months, your middle schooler is going to learn X, Y, and Z. And so for me, that's what that looks like. What did that look like for you? Do you pick a book and go through it, or do you have topics? What does that look like?
Yeah, we do it all. And so
Okay.
I think, the extreme of what you're talking about is like scope and sequence over 4 years of student ministry. Students are going to
Yeah,
learn
yeah,
X, Y, and Z. And, I've never been kind of all the way in that camp. I
yeah,
think for me, there's key things that we teach on every year, like we know that we're going to hit certain topics every single year. And so we start with some of those like big rocks, if you will, but then just kind of like we'll talk to students like what are the felt needs, what do
mm-hmm.
they think they need and their peers need, and let that inform it. What have we seen great churches like yours do, like what can we steal,
Oh,
we have like we just kind of all have the same sort of filter that we look through, and it's like, okay, based on conversations with students at the altar, based on what we know is going on generationally, based on what the Spirit of God is speaking to us into our church, and all of those things, we've got a couple lenses through which we look through, and then we kind of all come to the table and plan it out. And
yeah,
obviously in our setting, that means we've got staff that are coming to the table and doing that, who are informed, but like but I would do this with your student leadership team. I would do it with your
yeah,
key volunteers. I would, making the process collaborative, I think just makes it bigger than any one of us. And so I just really value that component. And so, yeah, we do like typically in September, we'll plan
okay,
for the whole of the coming year. And so it's not
okay,
always like 12 months on like a continual basis. It's like we'll get through all of the coming year in September. So at that point we'd be whatever 15, 16 months ahead. But then as you get towards September, we really only know like the next 4 months. And so we just kind of build in
yeah,
these rhythms. We've actually instituted this for our church as a whole. And there we do
okay,
about 6 months of
okay,
planning, 6 to 8 months of planning. And so I think just knowing where you're going, like you said, the confidence it gives you, the
mm-hmm.
conversation you can have with parents, and it helps me because a lot of times I'm like, I want to say that now, but really it's like, well, I should save that scripture, and I should save that
Yeah,
that topic, and I should save that focus for this time, because that's actually going to be more impactful than
yeah.
rather just going by what I feel in the moment. So it's been super helpful for us.
I got you. Well, that's cool. Uh, Next question I'll ask you, and this is because you are a person that processes things and likes to think through the process. This will be great. I'm looking forward to this. How do you evaluate your events that you do throughout the year? And then what is your process either leading up to the few days before or 2 months out, 1 week out? And then what's it like maybe a few days after? Because I know for me, when I'm done with the event, I just want to be done. Like, what's next? But we probably have to spend some time evaluating. So what does that overall thing look like for you?
Yeah, great question. We kind of have a split process. One for repeated events, like things that we do, say annually, or like we would look through a different lens for an event that we consistently do versus maybe like a one-off kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is having pre-identified wins for each of the events before you ever go into them, so in the planning process, going like, man, the reason that we're doing this event is, or the win for this event, and identifying that, and then having some specific ways that you're going to know ahead of time if you've won, and so
Yeah.
we do almost monthly event for students that's like, it's evangelistic, it's more creative. It's like, this is the night you can bring your friends, they're going to have a good time, they're going to hear the gospel. And so we identified, like a wins for those events. And then we have specific questions of like, did it move the dial? So one, we can design that event with our specific goals in mind, like one being like, did students have a good time? Like, I genuinely think it's okay to ask that question, like if they don't enjoy it, they're not coming back, so did students have a good time? Do they want to come back? Some of the questions can be really simple, and you can ask those actual questions on a Wednesday night. But then we're going to go, man, did it move kids towards life groups? Like, did we highlight community in an attractive way that a kid might go, I want to be a part of that? Did they hear the gospel? Like, if we missed the gospel somehow, or we didn't give students invitation, then it wasn't the point of the event. So having pre-identified, predetermined wins, I think is the big thing. And then I think, again, like, I'm going to hit the collaboration thing, but just like, man, having a perspective outside of just your own of if that event worked. So asking students and asking volunteers and having a collaborative process where you're not going to be afraid of what the results say, I think is really important, because, you could walk away from a night feeling like it's a win, whereas maybe your leaders are like, well, we didn't know what was happening, and we weren't communicated with, and we didn't know why. And so I think just, really having some time set aside to do that feedback, to make it collaborative, to get different perspectives. I think the challenge for us, and this may be just us, is like, you said when the event's over, I want to just be done, and for us, I think our tendency can be like, man, we're on to the next thing, like we get done for that event. I don't have time to think about that one. I got to think about, the next one. And so that can be a challenge, and to actually stop, number one, just take time and celebrate what the Lord did, if I'm being honest, can be a real challenge for us. And then creating space to really evaluate something is tough. So one-off events are great, but man, where we do our most like evaluation is like, okay, we know we're going to do that again. What did we learn? Where did we miss? What can be improved? All that. And so we use typical tools. Most of you guys would, like a SWOT analysis or different things like that, to know if we hit the target.
So if someone's not familiar with SWOT, will you explain that very quickly? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we use it a lot, just a simple tool of like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strength section really just helps us to evaluate, like, where did we win? What do we have to celebrate? And it actually does like help you just kind of all think through the same lens. What did we see as wins? It also broadens your perspective a little bit, because if you're anything like me, I can so focus on the things that like we didn't get right, that it's like, oh, whoa, yeah, that was awesome. So strengths, weaknesses is like, man, we set this out as our target, but we didn't hit it. What areas can we improve? Opportunities is maybe a little more obvious, but just, what are the key areas where we can move the dial moving forward, or what's something that we didn't even think about that, but man, we should have. And then threats sometimes is just like, what would prevent us from making this better the next time around? Or so we'll use SWOT. We also use like what was missing, what's broken, what's confusing, and what worked. It's just different way of phrasing the kind of same thing. So what worked, what was missing, what was confusing, and what was broken. And so and there's a billion tools like that. But having something like that kind of helps us all look through the same lens.
Yeah, I'm sure there's guys that are watching this 21, 22 and have never heard of SWOT, and it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds great. And so thank you. That would really help somebody. All right, so y'all have a big student ministry, not because numbers aren't important or aren't the main thing, but it's just reality. And so in a big student ministry like that, the stereotype is, but are you connecting individually with students? And so, because I know your heart, because I know you are intentional, how do you connect with those first time guests or those people that are attending your church? How do you not let them fall through the crack? What do y'all do for that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, man. Thank you for asking. I mean, for us, like the win of a Wednesday night, like our typical ministry night, is students are known, they're learning, and they're developing a faith of their own. So that first component for us is they are known. So
Yeah.
if a kid walks in and has a great time, but they walk out and nobody knows their name, like we missed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've got some things like that. I think for us, we have campuses of all different sizes. So we do
Yeah.
have a large ministry, but a lot of times, it's not necessarily a huge campus. So one is just like layered leadership with life group leaders, right? So that
Yeah.
because we do worship teaching in groups on Wednesday nights, that's
Yeah.
our kind of format. So when we break off into groups, that somebody knows that kid, knows if they're coming, knows when they're not,
Mm-hmm.
knows how to give them a call, all that. But as far as new students go, what we do is we have a group called Friends Become Family. And I think
Okay.
we're going to talk a little bit about our house rules maybe in a few minutes, but that's
Yeah.
one of our kind of values or house rules. Friends become family. And so you can call it whatever. It's like your VIP group or different things. But since a major component of our ministry is life groups, you don't constantly want to send new kids into those life groups because it's not a
Yeah.
good experience for them. It disrupts conversation, all the things. So the first time a kid comes, like they're going to get a bracelet that kind of identifies them as a new student. We'll also sometimes give bracelets to the friend that brought them,
Okay.
along with them, so that people can celebrate. Like, oh, you brought a friend tonight, but we'll know who those new kids are. And then we just tell them like, hey, after service, we've got a special group just for you. We typically have like pizza in that group and different things just to make their first time
Okay.
great. And so we invite students to come to that group for the first 2 times they come. So, hey,
Okay.
this time, and when you come back and join us, it's just a way of like giving them some familiarity, and then we'll just have like kind of icebreaker questions or games. It's really just
Yeah.
like they would learn some names and see that they're not the only one who's new that time. And then our thought is that by the time they get to week 3, you know that they're going to at least be around for a while. You can kind of put them in a group where it's not going to
Yeah.
be disruptive. And, so we try to make the end of that second week like, man, let's connect you to your life group leader. Oh, Blake, next week's going to be your life group leader. Let me introduce you to
Mm-hmm.
him. And so next week, you're not going to come to this room. You're going to but Blake's going to be right here, all that.
Yeah.
And so we try to make that handoff, and we'll do like t-shirts and some of those kinds of things. But the importance for us is to establish that like relational bridge where
Yeah.
and then we just take some of our great volunteers who are really good with first time students, really good connectors, and we kind of put them in that role. Because you need somebody who's like, yeah, maybe a little more welcoming or a little more excited or
Yeah.
whatever. And so that area or that event, Friends Become Family, is what helps us really to get started.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So are your life groups not like sixth grade boys, sixth grade girls, or how are your life groups set up?
Yeah, the great question. They are by
Okay.
grade and gender, for overwhelmingly by grade and gender. But again, like we want the life group leader to have a significant relationship with each of
Yeah.
those kids. And so if I just break off all sixth grade girls, go over here.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might be okay, by
Yeah.
consistency, by size of the group, all that. But more often than not, this is also a way of identifying like, oh man, we need to add another second grade or
Yeah.
another sixth grade life group. Like we're at that
Yeah.
point. So making sure that our life group leaders, their sort of rosters, if you will, are at a scale that's manageable is important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're working to develop relationships every week, and we highlight like, man, when you're building relationships, you're winning. And then if I'm constantly sending new kids into your group, it changes the dynamic, it changes
Yeah.
everything. So that's part of the reason for us.
And so this is a selfish question now. This is something I asked a few months ago when I was kind of thinking through things. How do you decide how to split a group? Like, so in our
Mm,
context, we have 99% one school, like Halton Middle School, Halton High School. And so for us, split, we have my eighth grade boys and girls are both running 30, 25 to 30 just in that group. And so, like, I need to split them, but I don't know how, where do I draw the line? Because they're all friends. And so, like, how do y'all decide these people are
yeah.
going to go to this group, these people are going to go to that group?
Yeah. Honestly, man, like so I think we could talk to how to split it, and then I think we can also talk a little bit to how to be more proactive about it, because
Mhm.
the ideal way to do it is that that group never grows to 30,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
so you're creating a challenge,
Yes.
and so knowing what your ideal group size is, and
Hmm.
I think we would probably all go off a rule of thumb of like, if you have more than 12 kids showing up consistently, it's time to split, it's too big.
Okay.
And so that's just my thought. It's not rule of
Yeah.
thumb,
Yeah.
but like, you know, it, it's either that, or it's I've got 12 kids on my roster, because if I have 12 kids on my roster, it probably means that there's 8 are going to show up every week or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like those are kind of the places where ideally you would almost cut that off and go, now we're going to start a new group. I think once they grow beyond, I think we sometimes maybe complicate it a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas like assigning those kids to go to a particular group is maybe our default. And maybe it's okay that it's like, okay, here are your two options. You get to choose, but you got to stick with what you
Yeah.
choose, so you got to be a little
Okay.
careful with like leaders feelings, so that like not all
Yeah.
the kids choose the
Absolutely.
one leader. So you got to help manage that without a doubt. I think what I have found is like sometimes we're a little too rigid with how we think about groups, especially for how
Hmm.
kids are and how they operate. Because like if I'm like, oh, these are your people, you're with these same people every week. Well, when a seventh grade, young lady gets in a fight with a friend at school, and now she doesn't want to come to church because she's sitting in the
Hmm.
life group with her, I don't
Yeah.
know that that's it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think just being okay with like some of that happens and some of it's natural, and like let's help you find the place that's best for you right now.
Yeah.
um and I think some of what the research shows through Lifeway and others is like actually one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our kids is like, yeah, we want leaders to be consistent in their lives, but we also want to expose them to multiple leaders who are reinforcing the same values and beliefs. And if we can give them,
Absolutely.
I think it's 7 of those relationships is like the magic number. So I'm not saying a new life group leader every week. I'm just saying maybe the goal isn't to have one life group leader who walks you through all 8 years of your student ministry experience.
Hmm.
Maybe that's 3 people over the course of those 8 years. Or so I think just being a little bit flexible sometimes is necessary when you think about life groups.
Yeah. And just referring to that same Lifeway study you talked about, we made a shift. Actually, when I left the Bob conference, I think Ben had made a presentation then about the
Yeah,
importance of having those. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago. And so
yeah,
at that, I left there and I came back and I said, okay, y'all are my sixth grade boys leaders. Y'all are my seventh grade boys, eighth grade boys. And so, like, through our students going through our ministry, they'll have 14 different men that'll invest in them. They'll have 2 leaders in every grade, sixth through 12th grade. And so that was from that idea is like, hey, every year you're gonna have a new set of leaders that hopefully
yep,
in that time you'll have 5 to 7 that really invest in you and you can help
yep,
grow. And so, no, I completely
yep.
agree. That's something. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm very
that's,
aware 30 is way too much for a small group.
I'm not calling you out, man. I'm just saying
No, no.
we're all there. We've all been there. And then
Yes.
just for anybody listening, that's within reach is the Lifeway study that we're talking about.
Yes.
So you can pick that up.
It's a great resource. Great resource. And then also Sticky Faith by Powell talks about it. And then
That's,
also Why They Stay by Dr. Steve Parr. All three of
that's right.
those kind of really hammer on that one idea
Yeah.
of multiple adults that help your students grow. anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. Some of that was on me. I wanted to ask a little deeper into that. So thanks, Ryan, for that. But this last April, I went to Youth Pastor Summit and with a group of guys here from Shreveport Bossier area. And I was able to sit in your breakout and you talked about your 12 house rules. And so most
Yeah.
breakouts when I go to, I'm kind of like, I've heard something like that before. But this was like, man, this is really cool. This is a cool idea. So explain, if you don't mind, for the people what the 12 house rules are. How did you come up with it? And then how do you use it in your ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about here, but at the end of the day, our house rules are basically just our value statements for our ministry. And so one of the things that we believe is like, you know, your student ministry is going to have its own culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
it will, and that culture is either going to be by design or by default. And so I think we've probably all done some things in ministry where you look up a couple years into it and you're like, oh man, this is not what I intended to build, you know, but here we are. And so the house rules were just a way of us going like, man, this is the kind of ministry we want to be. This is what we want our staff and our kids to embody. And this is what we think are the highest values. And so it was really just aimed at that. Partly they're like descriptive, it's like who we are, and partly
Mm-hmm.
they're like prescriptive. They're like, this is who we're going to be, you know.
Yeah.
And so they also have been a great resource to just give our volunteers language of how we talk about who we are, and even as we you know address kids, we use these values. So I mean, I can list them all for you if it's helpful, but you know, it's like Jesus is better. You know, we want kids to
Mm-hmm.
understand that nothing in this world even remotely compares to the pleasure, you know, of knowing Jesus and walking with Jesus. So that's one of them. You know, we like to party. Church shouldn't be endured; it should be enjoyed. You know, like we think that's a value for us. Fun is a value, you know, and so
Mm-hmm.
other people may think that's not, you know, spiritual enough or theological enough, but it's important for us from our perspective. So everyone contributes is about helping students discover their calling and find their gifts and find their purpose, step into who God's calling them to be. We have a series of like we are statements. So it's like we are worship leaders, people bringers, note takers, tone setters, and friends become family is another one I mentioned to you
Yeah.
already. So we could call that like our VIP group or our new student group,
Mm-hmm.
but it's values based at this point. Uh, the others are we speak highly, we love deeply, no one sits alone, and all are welcome. And so those are our
Yeah.
12. We could talk about each of them, but really they just are a way of going like, you know, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're coming back to this is who we are, and
Mm-hmm.
this is how we want to think about ministry. These are some of the things we want our kids to embody. And so yeah, they've been really helpful for us.
Yes.
And there's been a handful of ministries across the country who've kind of grabbed them, modified them, made them their own. And
Yeah.
it's really just about like mission and values. Like what are we here for? What is God uniquely calling us to be?
Yeah. And I liked what you said toward the beginning. Said that we're being proactive. This is what we want you to be. This is what we want you. This is what we're going to be as a ministry. Like the one you talked about. No one sits alone.
Yeah,
Students can really come in and get in their clique and not worry about who's sitting by themselves. So communicating a simple truth like that consistently
yeah.
is, hey, here at Movement Students or here at H-Town Students, no one sits alone. We're going to make sure we're intentional. And so how often do you mention these? And I'm sure they're posted everywhere or in your ministry, but how often do you talk about
Every week we talk about something every week. You know, we'll usually take
on a Wednesday
maybe
night?
one, yeah, on a Wednesday night.
Okay. Okay.
You know, so again, it's just like if they're value statements, you don't have to find ways to work them in, you know. So it's like
Yeah, that's
it
true.
might be during like a ministry moment where you're going like, students, we are worship leaders, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, volunteers who have to like correct the way that kids are interacting with each other. They're like, guys, come on, like here we love deeply, we speak highly, you
Yeah.
know, like they're using them in that way. You know, if we're trying to celebrate a student who, like I'm thinking about a girl named Ro here who, for like our big Christmas night of worship, she had 3 friends from school who were kind of involved in a creative piece who didn't know the Lord, hadn't met Jesus, and they came on that night because they were a part of like helping her build something, and all three of them,
Mm-hmm.
the Lord saved all three of them. And so when we
That's so
talk about
cool.
that, we're like, man, bro, you are a people bringer. Like you are serious about making sure your friends get to know Jesus, and you bring them along. And so
Mm-hmm.
they just become a part of your normal language. And then probably once a year, we will have like a sermon series that is connected to house
Yeah.
rules. It may not cover all 12. It might be
Yeah.
around, if we do a series on the power of your words, we're going to call it We Speak Highly. Like if we
Yeah.
do a series around compassion or loving your neighbor or loving your enemy, we're going to call it We Love Deeply. So we're looking for ways to like kind of institutionalize that stuff. And then, we'll train leaders on it. We cover the values in like our huddles before service with leaders. And then probably the biggest way we use it is like when we launch a campus or we're going to a new place, like this will be the first sermon series they go through, is like this kind of house rules, who are we, kind of thing. So
Yeah, and just hearing you talk about it again brings me back to when I was in the breakout. Like, I think everybody has a discipleship strategy, or they should, or they've been told you need a discipleship strategy. But this just takes it one step further and more. More practical. Of like, this is and our discipleship strategy is we want students to know their faith, take ownership of their faith, and go make their faith known. That means something to me, maybe to a parent, a kid, they don't care what that means. But a house rules, though, every one of those helps the student see, okay, that's what I'm called to do. That's what I'm supposed to do as a believer in Jesus, as a part of movement students. That's what I'm supposed to
yeah.
do. I just think that's a game changer. That's really, really cool. And so,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
man.
go
I
ahead.
think
Yeah,
you hit it on the head, because like we kind of all have those like missional, like for us, it's we're called to lead students to become more like Jesus so they can radically transform their world for him. Right? You
yeah,
just had a very similar kind of
yeah.
missional statement. This is like the double click of like, just value. There's mission and then there's values, and we probably have them for like
Mhm.
our churches as a whole. But I
Yeah,
just think the value of having that within your ministry is really significant.
that's awesome. All right, final one. Number 5 is, how do we better equip the parents that are a part of our student ministry to raise their students to be followers of Jesus? I know you are Deuteronomy 6. We're all, parents are the primary disciplers, but how do you, at your ministry context, better equip the parents in your student ministry?
Yeah, man, it's a tough one, right? So let's just acknowledge that from the beginning. So I think it's worth. I mean, if you're listening to this, you care about these things, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's worth just highlighting. So the latest research would show us that like 99% of ministry leaders would say what you just said. The parent is the primary disciple maker in the home, and obviously we all agree. Yes and amen. My kids are my
Yeah.
my 9-year-old, my 6-year-old, my responsibility, not the church's. However,
Yeah.
the overwhelming majority of parents say that it's the church's responsibility to
Yeah.
disciple their kids. So first of all, we got to recognize there's a pretty significant chasm between the way that we look at the ministers look at parenting and the way the parents look at parenting. And if everybody's always saying like it's your job, then it won't happen.
Yeah.
So we gotta acknowledge that gap and like stop pointing some fingers, and just go like, man, we're in it together, And so
Hmm.
it is true they're the primary disciple maker, but if they don't know that, so one is we got to
Yes.
tell them, we got to talk more consistently about that. That they are the primary spiritual influence in the life of a kid. I think parents oftentimes feel ill-equipped to do
Yeah.
that. I think they feel like they don't have a lot of parents underestimate. We know this too from the research, the
Hmm.
influence they have in the life of their children, especially as they get older. And what all of the research is telling us is like, even as kids, exit the home and go beyond, it is the parental relationships that they come back to as having the most
Hmm.
influence. And again, like you're on here because you care about this, but like, we know that the number one determining factor in the passing on the faith of the parents to the next generation is the relationship with their father. So that's not to negate like the influence of, we got single moms who are discipling their kids like crazy, get it more than anybody else, but it is a call up to the men, and fathers to know like the closeness of the relationship with the father is the number one determining factor in the faith of their kids. So we just got to teach people that. And actually what's I think hopeful for dads who might feel overwhelmed or not know what to do, is like, it actually is not even determined by the level of their faith necessarily. It is closeness with the father. So all that's like the foundational stuff, right? I just want to make sure we're kind of all aware of what's being said and what's out there. And man, we're trying to figure it out. So we do everything everybody does. We do the parenting classes. We do 4 to 6 parent workshops a year. We do them on the things that parents are asking about: technology, sexual identity, just whatever it happens to be the hot topics of the moment. We just go for it, and we collaborate with parents in that way. We're going to host a parenting conference this year, which is new for us, so we're really excited about that. We try to connect parents to existing resources. So things like Access is something that we use a lot, and pointing parents to those conversation guides that they produce. We'll send out bits of like the Culture Translator, the free newsletter that they have. I think a lot of times our communication with parents is aimed at like, bring your kid to this thing versus here's how we can add value to your family. And so I think shifting our lens a little bit and just going like, man, and you guys all know this, but parents are not the bad guy, right? Like parents are the primary influence. Coming alongside them, going, how do we add value? How do we support them? How do we encourage them? How do we, make sure that they are taking advantage of discipleship opportunities within the church? Like, that's how we can make a difference. And any youth pastor worth their salt at some point realizes like, man, if I just reach a kid and I just send them back into a home that hasn't been transformed, while it's cool that there's an evangelistic opportunity for them there, at the same time, like, man, where we really have the opportunity to make a difference is to reach the parent, reach a home. And so if we can just give them resources that are aimed at adding value, help normalize like gospel conversations in the home, or praying with your kids, bust the myth that they don't have to be perfect parents. But for me, I think the biggest thing is like, research would suggest that for 60+% of parents, they would say the number one goal of parenting is to ensure that their kids are happy or successful. And only 14% of parents would say that the primary goal of parenting is to pass their faith on to the next generation. So that's the biggest opportunity, is to go, man, God did not give you your children so that they could be happy or well-educated or successful or on the athletic field, like superstars. He gave you your children so that you could help them become fully devoted followers of Jesus. And there's a lot of great things out there, but recently Shane Pruitt, who a lot of us know and love, posted it's like a 0.02697% chance, that your kids will be a professional athlete, and 100% chance to stand before God. And so it's that, right? Like, it's just helping parents reframe what is the point? Why why has God entrusted you with children? That's it. This is it. And that's actually, how God has designed his kingdom to be advanced. It's like primarily through passing on the faith to the next generation. So it's an exciting opportunity, but it's a challenge. So if you're struggling with connecting with parents, you're not the only one. Us too. But those are a couple of the things that we're trying.
Yeah, and so I'll just reiterate some of those that you said. Access is really good. I really, really love Access. And so if your parents are struggling with how to have the sex talk, or how to talk about pornography, or any of these major conversations, Access has good resources. We also use at our church CPYU, the Center of Parent and Youth Understanding by Walt Mueller. It's a little newsletter that I print out every month for our parents. And so it just has culture updates for them. So if you're listening and you don't have something like that, it's really good. And then also, Ryan, as you were talking, we do a parent conference, it's called Parents Only. We do it twice a year. And so every year I always give some kind of talk, pornography, technology. We always talk about some major topic. But one year we did how to do a devotional. And so we asked all the parents, how many of you do family devotionals at home? And it was shocking how little the number of people raised their hands. And so I got kind of just put me and our high school pastor like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so as student pastors, yes, we need to tell them these topics. Yes, because we're the residential expert and trying to help them biblically. What does that say? But we need to train them how to teach their kids the Bible because they're, like you said, ill-equipped. And so what somebody, I can't remember, I think it was Brandon Lewis. I don't know if you know Brandon Lewis, but he had said that something he had seen families do is our church used to do 8-week studies, where we would have these classes of 8 weeks, all these Lifeway curriculum that are 8 weeks. He said, well, I took my family through these 8-week curriculums. It has a 20-minute video we watch as a family, and it has discussion questions. And so if you don't know how to open up the Bible and, exegete scripture and walk through those things, that's okay. Lifeway has great resources. There's all kinds of resources. Right Now Media, there's all kinds of video-driven things that'll help your family just have discussion questions together. And so that's something y'all could do on Sunday evenings. Y'all could do on, whatever works for your family. And so anyway, sorry, I'll get off that soapbox. But that was something equipping the families.
That's great, man. It's really good.
Well, Ryan, that was a lot of really, really helpful information. So I am so thankful again that you are willing to give up some time to be here. And I know people are going to learn a lot. And so again, just thank you so much.
Yeah, man. And if I could, man, if you're listening to this today, just don't grow weary in well-doing, right? God has positioned you where you are for a reason, for those kids, for those families. Don't give up. It can be a tough journey, but man, the beauty of what we get to be a part of is so significant. And Blake, I don't know about you, but man, I believe the Lord is doing a new thing. And what we're seeing in the next generation in our church and what I'm starting to see around the country, I just believe the Spirit of God is moving in the next generation. And so thank you for all that you do to make a difference in the lives of kids and students. The Lord uses it. So don't grow weary in well-doing.
Absolutely. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, we have episodes just like this. This is episode 9, but all the episodes before this are just to do what Ryan just did, help equip each and every one of us to grow in our ministry and what God's called us to do. So if you haven't already subscribed or followed, please follow so you don't miss any episodes just like this. All right. We'll catch y'all next week. See y'all soon.
Later.